Hello indie game fans, another lots of fantastic indie games to look out for in this video, where I just happen to have found enough of them, all with the general grim dark aesthetic, but they are surprisingly varied across genres and are not all Souls-like titles. Let's begin with Good Night. Not the best name, but this one-button bullet hell title from a Filipino developer is certainly worth a wishlist. It draws upon Filipino mythology, but crosses that with Dante's Inferno, and perhaps games like Fury and Rhythm Doctor, into one of the most intense-looking titles that I have come across. You play as a knight, moving around in a circle, trying to avoid projectiles, where tapping the button causes you to reverse direction, and I do love games like this, where the controls are so simple, but the gameplay could potentially be very deep.
Clement is in its twilight. The sands have buried its kingdoms. Corruption unburies its subjects. From such bountiful seeds, this world has reaped only entropy, chaos, and night. And though the secrets of Talamel's ruination are entombed below the sea of sand, it's a truth that will not rest.
I have mentioned Sense of Aura in a previous video on Souls-like titles, but rather than a third-person action game, this is instead from the perspective of a Zelda-style action-adventure title. I love the world building in this, having you exploring a world buried in sand, where you pilot a ship that hovers across this, venturing forth into dungeons in order to destroy evil and to protect mankind. The stamina-based, deliberate and punishing combat system is definitely one for fans of the genre, where there does appear to be quite an extensive progression system for your character, which leads to multiple possible builds. Definitely closer to something like Death's Door rather than Dark Souls, but it is no less intriguing and is one to look forward to. This video is brought to you by Age of Darkness Final Stand, a defense-focused real-time strategy title where you have to defend the last bastion of humanity against a deadly fog and the nightmares within. If you're at all familiar with indie games, I'm sure that you can see the similarities to They Are Billions, only swapping out the steampunk zombie setting for a classic high fantasy world where you're facing off against what looks like ghouls and the undead, so not quite zombies, but it does come close. However, I do love the survival base builder, and we could always use more entries in the space, so do take a look at some of the features here. It has something called Swarm Tech, which, impressively, allows for up to 70,000 units on screen, a day-night cycle, an enhanced fog of war system known as the Living Death Fog, randomized malices and blessings for each run, hero characters, elite nightmare units, and a multifaceted skill tree for your unit upgrades. So all the things that you would want for a game like this. In doing some research, the company isn't that indie due to the number of employees, but still, to be making an RTS in 2021 is a pretty brave decision, so I don't mind showing this off. Alright, so Osiris New Dawn isn't exactly new, having launched in early access in 2016, so it has been 5 years, but it did recently get on my radar, and it's a sci-fi space survival title that looks neat, chugging along nicely in early access, although it isn't without its faults. It has quite the classic survival game systems of scavenging for resources, crafting, exploration, and keeping those survival meters up, but it does have the ambitious scope of things like vehicle crafting, including flying vehicles, base building, both first and third person camera options, the ability to build a space station and more, where it's definitely on the grittier side of things as compared to something like No Man's Sky, so if you're interested in this genre, definitely do give this a look. Let me tell you, the Plague Doctor or Corvian aesthetic is pretty hot right now, where a title that looks awesome is The Serpent Rogue, an action-adventure title where you play as an alchemist exploring a grim dark fantasy world. The cel-shaded look is pretty neat, not to mention good-looking action and even a monster taming element. Central to all of this is the alchemy, where you're brewing potions with a variety of effects, including the ability to transform into giant monsters, looking like it has the potential to be something special. A game that has a little bit more of an unnerving horror game vibe is Depth, where you control a group of fragile, freaky-ass creatures known as Depths, making a way through the world while fending off monsters and threats. From the glitchy, surreal art style, designs and even the sound effects, especially right at the end of this trailer, this might just be the game to give you the creeps. Cyberpunk is pretty grimdark, right? So I suppose that Loopmancer counts among the titles on this list, being a roguelite platformer and a time loop mystery all bundled into one. Most interestingly, it comes to us from a Chinese studio and publisher, where the environments, aesthetics and design have a notable Chinese influence. You play as a private detective investigating the death of a female journalist and was killed while trying to do so, only finding himself right back at the start of the day as he wakes up in his own bed. The developers mentioned 7 different stages, including a luxurious hotel, a training base, a biotech company, and even a gloomy village, and also mentions things like uncovering story beats from one run to the next, possibly affecting the choices that you can make, and it does seem like a very intriguing title in terms of structure. Oh, and needless to say, the action looks fantastic, so fingers crossed it controls well and will turn out great.
In this place of ruin and monsters,
She is my protector.
she is my knight. She is my sister.
She gave her life so that we may face this evil as one.
For we were created to stop it.
One of the most amazing looking action titles in development is Solstice, set in a pretty grim dark world where powerful warriors known as chimeras defend humanity from invading wraiths. The messed up thing is that chimeras are created from the sacrifice of a human being binding their soul to the other party, where a pair of sisters were chosen in this particular case. Despite the name, this is not a Souls-like title, but rather a character action game, so expect something a little bit more fast-paced. A variety of weapons are shown off in this trailer, together with some grotesque bosses and even a hint of the darker side of the chimera, making this one to watch.
Where one would fall, together we shall prevail.
The post-apocalypse is certainly grimdark, where, you know, The entire planet has been devastated by some cataclysmic event, and it is in this world where Batora Lost Haven is set. It has quite the interesting setup, where a regular 16-year-old girl finds herself with powers beyond imagination, having both enhanced physical abilities as well as mental powers, having to use these to save the Earth. It's not quite Diablo and not quite Zelda, but what I can say is that the level designs, lighting effects and environments do look amazing. Pretty intense boss fights shown off as well, with perhaps some relatively light bullet hell elements as compared to games like Fury or Good Night at the start of this video, but it does seem like another great game to look forward to. I told you that Corvians were pretty hot right now, with games like the upcoming Crowsworn just adding to it, but before we get there, we have Thymesia to look forward to, recently getting a new trailer which has a release date. It's another action title, where you play as something named Codename Corvus, the Plague Doctor mask-wearing protagonist, adventuring in the kingdom of death and harnessing the power of disease to take out your enemies. The variety of weapons and the ability to transform into a crow in combat makes it seem interesting, so watch out for this in December, taking the #1 spot. For more grimdark Souls-like titles, watch these videos and I will see you after the jump.